minyan in the mitzvah count, but how many Taryag mitzvahs Emor is actually in second place, which is a very well kept secret. Kind of smack in the middle of the parsha is one of the most fundamental mitzvahs of all Torah. Don't desecrate my holy name. I should be sanctified within amongst Bnei Israel. I am Hashem who sanctifies you. Not to do, God forbid, a chil Hashem, to desecrate Hashem's name in the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying Hashem's name. It's actually interesting to me that Kedusha, sanctity, is a theme throughout this entire parsha. Parsha starts with the mitzvah of the Kohanim, and that word, that Shorosh Kodesh, comes up again and again and again. The Kedusha of a Kohen, the mitzvah to sanctify a Kohen, because a Kohen is Kadosh, is sanctified, is holy, is elevated. There are things he can't do. He can't come into contact with the mace, with the dead body, with certain exceptions. He can't marry certain women. He has a number of restrictions on him. We are supposed to elevate him and sanctify him and call him for the first aliyah, give him the first opportunity. Of course, in this town, we don't often get the chance to do a mitzvah like that. Some of us have had the fortune of having marry into kahuna, but for some reason those kohanim, what you call it, only don't make as much as maybe Rabbi Klashchik and I and Stuart Yerbuchuta would appreciate. And then another very, very famous section, which Parsha probably the most, is the Parshas Hamoados, the Shabbos and Yom Tovs, where all the we have two large sections where all the Yom Tovs are gone through. Parshas Pinchas, the Korbanos, the sacrifices, and Parshas Emor, the basic mitzvahs of these Yomei Kodesh, of these Mikrai Kodesh. It's interesting, this is not Parshas Kedoshim. Parshas Kedoshim was last week. And striking, Parshas Kedoshim, last week, if you look at at least the early part of the Parsha, it's interesting, the mitzvahs are very different theme. Like we have some of the most fundamental mitzvahs in the Torah, Parshas Kedoshim, and the first part of the Parsha, they're like almost like universal kind of mitzvahs, things that everyone appreciates the importance of. The things that we don't necessarily think of specifically as being kadosh ideas. I'm not saying they are, but the point is, in Parshas Kedoshim, we have things like not speaking lashon hara, not stealing, paying wages on time, not to curse people, to go ahead and show respect for elders or your parents, not to hate someone else, to go ahead and not take revenge, and to love your fellow like yourself. We move back to our parsha and the kedusha, the sanctity in there, and it occurs to me that it's like a lot of times we like to figure out how we're going to solve all the world's problems. One moment we're going to solve all the world's problems. I'm going to say, what are you guys doing? 10 minutes solve the world's problems? Well, in order to solve the world's problems, it's a good idea to have a sense, a handle on what those problems are. So, a lot of times people speak about what is the biggest problem of a generation. And for many, many years, people have been saying, lashon hara. Speaking lashon hara, speaking negatively about others. Machlokas is another big one that gets recognized as being a big winner or loser. That fighting, strife among Jews is, or even among the world in general. The fact that you can't have civilized debate, that's a problem. I definitely want to put up there as a candidate that I think one of the biggest problems in our world today, the world that we all live in, Jewish and non-Jewish both, is the idea of kedusha, sanctity, holiness, which means separating. Not everything is okay. There are things that are restricted. There are things you're not allowed to do. There are people you're not allowed to marry or have a relationship with. There are things you can't eat. There are things that, even though they're not going to harm anybody else, God says not to do. And the world seems to have a big problem with this concept. In fact, if you think about it, some of the things we're talking about Kedusha. Kedusha's Kohen. The fact that the Kohen is an elevated status. Every Jew is holy, but Kohen is the elevated status of Kedusha. Has extra restrictions and extra privileges. You tell some people that and they say, what? What is this? Everyone's the same. How can people be treated differently? How can you say one person is holier than another? Goes against my sensibilities. That offends me. I think everyone should be the same. the concept of mishpat hashava l'kol, the Torah very often speaks about, and the Gemara speaks about very often, the Psukim that point to, there is a concept of equality before the law. There's a concept that the mishpat hashava l'kol, that you can't go ahead and do this to anyone, that you go to court, any two people, you're both equal. It doesn't matter. There is, and yet there are distinctions. Distinctions between a Kohen and a Levi in Yisrael. There are distinctions between men and women. There are distinctions between people. Now, the greatness of Yiddishkeit is with all those distinctions and all those differences. The ultimate thing that every person has is the capacity to reach their fullest potential. And it doesn't matter whether I'm a Kohen, Levi, Yisrael, it doesn't matter. I have within myself a Kedoshim, a holiness, and potential to reach, and that's ultimately what Hashem's going to judge me on. That's what counts. But in this world, there are differences and distinctions. And Kedusha means sometimes you separate, and sometimes the rules are different. And the world just can't stand that. And what are you telling me? I can't do this. Why tell me I'm not allowed to do this? Who does it hurt? How can you possibly say something would be forbidden? Jews and non-Jews alike, this is something they have a terribly difficult time with. And in the world today, Kedusha, like never before, is under attack. And if one wants to be holy, and refrain, again, from those relationships you can't have, the things you're not allowed to talk about, the things you're not even allowed to look at, you have to fight a daily war to be able to stay kadosh in a world that is opposed to it. The world is very fine with a good chunk of Parshas Kedoshim. Love your fellow, love your neighbor, be a good person, be honest. They're cool with that. That's great. But we, B'nai Yisrael, we Torah keeping the Jews, recognize that's half the story. All those Mrs. Parshas Kedoshim, of course you have to be a mensch. Of course you have to be a person of integrity. Of course, how you treat each other, huge. Absolutely. And I'm not going to say for 1 second that the Lashon Hara Machlokes is not a major problem in this generation. But to be a true Torah Jew, to really reach the greatness Hashem wants, you have to combine that as well with the Kedusha, with the sanctity. This doesn't affect anybody except myself. And yet, it's wrong. It's inappropriate. It's got to be avoided. And I'm not going to be offended by my sensibilities because Hashem is saying that I can't do that. And that's something, I don't have to go and yell and scream at people, but I don't have to accept that that's okay. Because Hashem said it's not. And I'm perfectly fine going along with that. It's the combination of both those things. And people have to realize that a Torah Jew, when we really stick to our guns about Kedusha, it doesn't take away from how we treat one another. It doesn't take away from our bin al chavero. On the contrary, it enhances it. And when people see that a Jew can go ahead, we're kippah, boy, can be from, can be salo, can be shtar, can be kadosh, should stay away from things that the world is saying are fine and wonderful, and we're saying no, they're not. And yet they see we can act like the greatest of the mention. Those two things combined, that brings us to what I started with, beginning the parsha. That's ultimately the way we bring the greatest mitzvah of showing what a Jew is really capable of, with both the kedusha, the sanctity, and yet the smile and the chayin and the gentleness we treat everybody with. That results in the greatest of mitzvahs, the Kiddush Hashem.